there, I'm Sarah Holbrooke. I'm the Executive Director of the Pinhead Institute here in Telluride, Colorado, and the lucky person who gets to interview the mayor, Sean
Hi,
Murphy.
Sarah.
How the heck are you?
I'm great. How are you?
So what's going on? All sorts of
Happy
good stuff.
New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I know. Well, we haven't sat down together since 2018.
December.
Remember the
Exactly.
old days, the good old... I'm not sure they were ever
Well-
very good, but whatever. How's 2019 looking so far?
Well, interestingly enough, sort of looking forward, we had a council meeting on January 15th, and I delivered my obligatory State of the Town address.
Yes, exactly.
So basically that's both a look back and a look forward. The look back, as we know ad nauseum, is that on the economy side, you'll be happy to know that we finished 22% above where we projected for real estate transfer tax.
Oh, good.
So we are in very good shape for our capital fund this
And
year
that
going
money
forward.
is for capital expenses
Yes.
like sewers
Like
or
sewers and roads and
things you can put off
repaving the
if you
spur
need to.
this year, and exactly
Great.
some of the elective projects or the expansion of the town park stage, those sort of things.
Yes,
So,
and that's going on, right? I saw a structure there that didn't used to be there.
exactly, and we're getting that dried in. I believe the work below the existing stage is all
Mm-hmm.
finished and trimmed out now, and so it's really what's going on inside the catering, separate, detached, adjacent
Yes,
facility at
yes,
this point.
I've seen that.
So
That's
that's moving
amazing.
along nicely. On the economy front as well, sales tax, we don't have the numbers since the numbers don't get reported for December until January 22nd, so we're
Soon.
literally soon.
Yeah.
But through November of 2018, we were 4% ahead on sales tax too.
Okay, good.
So our collections, and again, we'll remind viewers, those revenues go to general operating expenses.
Keeping the lights on, paying the
salaries,
mayor.
paying the council, paying the mayor, exactly. The huge salary drain that
Yes,
is, as well as having the staff paid and doing the day-to-day function of
Right, like
serving
the snow
public.
plows and things like that.
Exactly, which
That's-
thankfully
yeah.
we've got a lot more snow to report.
I know, so it's kind of interesting because last year was a terrible year for snow. I mean, the winter season of a year ago.
Right.
And so actually, sales tax was going up a bit because people were shopping rather than skiing.
We thought, yes.
We thought,
yes.
yeah. And so it's nice that we're up from that because people are certainly skiing now, aren't they?
Well, they
Aren't
definitely
Sean?
are, and frankly, as of
Yeah.
January 15th, we were only at 93% of average annual precipitation / snowfall.
93.
So we still weren't there, but of course, I left the next day to go to Jackson Hole to a mayor's meeting, and what do we get?
A dump.
About 2 feet more of snow.
Yay!
So I'm guessing that we are
We're
pretty
close.
much right where we need to be
Yeah.
on an average annual basis. And the other good news is, as everybody knows, most of our snow comes in February and March.
Oh, good.
So the fact that we are right where we need to be through the latter part of January here, 2/3
Yeah.
through January, that puts us in really good shape on the snow front too.
Oh, good.
And obviously last year, you remember, the Telluride Ski Resort was doing dinners every week for their staff and like employing people and losing significant amount of money, I think, but trying to keep goodwill, trying to keep camaraderie, and trying to keep their employee base, which they've attracted back. So let's hope that we're in for a lot more snowy days. I think there's another system that's projected to move in later in this week.
Yeah.
And so
And it's supposed to get cold and stay cold for a bit, which is nice because then the snow stays light and powdery as opposed to melting.
yeah, so prospectively for 2019, we're setting up for a good snow year, and I think we're hopefully going to have one of the stronger ski seasons we've had in the last several years.
Right.
So that would be great. The only other thing, looking back on State of Town, was obviously the housing things we've been talking about. We're proud that in April and May we got the Virginia Placer open with the 46-person boarding house, the 18 apartments, and the 3 tiny houses.
And now the 3 tiny houses are filled, the 18
Everything is
filled,
100%
and-
occupied.
Oh, wow, and even the boarding house is
with
great.
almost zero turnover. We have 100 people on the waiting list between those two projects. We have about 65 on the waiting list for
What two projects?
Well, so we kind of cut it into the boarding house portion of the
It's one
project,
project.
and then the apartments and the
Okay,
tiny houses
got
is
it,
another.
got
So
it.
for the boarding house, for those 46 spots, there are probably about 50 people on a waiting list, and around 50 people on a waiting list for the 18 apartments and 3 tiny houses too.
And how much
So-
does the boarding house cost? That's kind of an interesting economical situation, right?
A shared room is $385 a month, and a single room is $425 a month.
Yeah.
So it's super affordable. It's probably kind of extraordinary, actually,
Yeah.
to be able to live in the community at
And I
that
remember
rate.
the town was going to hire someone to kind of watch over it and make sure people were taking good care of it. Has that person been
Yes,
secured, and is that working out as a position?
Max is doing really well for us. So we have both Melanie, who's our overall renting housing director. She manages the Shendoga rentals as well as the Virginia Placer rentals, and will manage any other rental projects that we do in the future. And then Max whom we stole from effectively Big Billy's. He's been just doing a phenomenal job.
Oh, great.
And really has, he's been, our hope with Max was that he would help bind a community, and it's happening. So by all accounts, the people I know that live in the boarding house have said that they really feel like they're more cohesive, that they have a lot more social interaction, and so that was exactly the grand hope.
Right,
at
it's not
least,
only
if
housing,
not-
it's a little bit of a community as well.
Right, exactly. So that's working out well. And then the only other thing to round out State of the Town for 2018 is obviously the election results that we've talked about before, which was some additional monies are now in place to come and help affordable housing.
Yes.
So the 2 mil property tax will generate prospectively now going forward, starting in 2019, about $544,000 a year, in addition to our baseline revenue of about $1 million.
Right.
So we've taken $1 million of almost, we won't call this guaranteed revenue, but very likely revenue, and we've augmented that now. The community said, yes, you may have 50% more. So we have $1.5 million coming in for the next projects.
So let's talk about the next project.
Next project is, to my knowledge, is in the first quarter of 2019, we're going to sit down. The county and the town have a memorandum of understanding that we signed more than a year ago to jointly develop the Sunnyside parcel. That's the 4-acre plot owned by the county directly to the west of the Adder Creek condominium section.
Exactly. So between the end of town as we know it with the school and the traffic circle that's just outside of town at the beginning of Lawson.
Right, exactly, and more precisely between the end of Eider Creek and the second traffic circle.
Right.
So the society turn traffic circle. So that master planning process will involve a request for proposal for design build teams.
You want a design
So-
build team?
Yes, we're going to still approach that because the town is going to pay for the construction of the housing portion of that. The county will generously come in with the land.
Oh, great.
And the town will then, basically, the town and county will jointly select a design build team, and then that process will unfold. I would say, think you should expect within 6 months after the selection of that team, we'll have plans that will go through the county planning commission, because that's part of the county.
Right, so it doesn't have
So
to go
it's a
through the
little-
town HARC.
Right. Now, the long-term objective is to annex the land into the town, but my understanding is that the planning approvals and the, basically the
The okay to build.
will come from the
specifically
county.
from the county.
Yeah.
Now, how many units do we think that might hold?
A little more than 20.
Oh, that's nice.
The county has done several of its own sort of research efforts in the past and looked for a public-private partner to sort of come in and help build with them. They've done some rough indication of 20 to 22 units that are possible on that site.
Sure.
So those will probably be, a mix of 1, 2, 3 bedroom townhomes.
Great.
So that should be great when that's done. And it's a relatively flat surface. The only logistics that we need to work out are access, doing effectively a new curb cut and getting up, the grade of the hill there to the bench, as well as we want to also design in a bigger bus stop.
Right, because
to
you
coordinate
assume
with
the
Smart.
Lawson bus will pull over there a bunch.
Exactly.
So you want to make sure that
we
it's
want
easy
to provide a little bit more
pedestrian
safer
access.
and more generous space for bus pickup and drop off.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. So that'll happen in 2019 as well. Let's see what else is going to go.
Well, let's talk about what happened at the council meeting last week. Anything
Sure.
new?
You know what? Actually, there were quite a few things that happened. We had, as a work session, actually, the Telluride Mountain Village Owners Association Gondola Subcommittee came to present to not just us, but then in the succeeding couple of days to the Town of Mountain Village Town Council, as well as to the County Commission. It was sort of a threefer for them. It was the beginning of their public education plan, or sort of outreach, after they've been engaged in about a 3-year process of studying the existing gondola capacity, which basically their message there was, holy cow, we now have 3 million riders in 2018.
Up from?
3 million trips, up from 2.8 million, which was kind of like bordering on being the max. So for 2018, they had even more demand, and frankly, the number one tourist attraction in this marketplace in our region is the gondola. And not only is it a tourist attraction, but it's obviously also an economic lifeline between the two communities.
Right, for commuters.
And so they have, on that latter score, engaged a firm, I think it's called BBC, nothing to do with the British Broadcasting network, but this BBC entity has done a survey of the usage of the gondola as well as economic impact to both towns. So the purpose of the work session was, again, work session, no decisions, no
Just talking about
commitments. It was
stuff.
just talking about what are the facts, what's going on with this system, where are we within its useful life. It was meant to, obviously there's a 30-year obligation, and we're 22 years into that right now. Is the
So in
gondola
8 years,
being-
is it going to fall apart?
No, in 8 years, basically the formal arrangement that requires the Town of Mountain Village Owners Association to pay the annual $3.5 million operating expense plus capital expenses.
I'm sorry, how much is the operating
The
cost?
annual operating cost is approximately $3.5 million.
So it's funny, it's just a little more than $1 a ride.
Well, there is that, yes,
Right? Yeah.
And the rides they count now, this number sounds huge, but it's actually anybody exiting the gondola. So if you're taking the gondola from the Gondola Plaza here in town, you get off at San Sofia, you're counted as one trip.
Okay.
Then maybe you peek your head out the door, or you go out skiing or something, or you come back to that location. Then you go down to the Mountain Village, that's a second trip.
Okay.
And then if you were to then change gondolas and go on the short gondola, I don't know what the official name for that one is, over to the grocery store to the Town Hall of Mountain Village, that's a third trip. So one person could theoretically, going from the town of Telluride to the grocery store in Mountain Village, be counted as making 6 trips.
And if you
So-
don't get off at the San Sofia and you don't
That's
continue on
not
the
counted
short
as
one,
a- yes.
then it's just one trip. If
Correct.
I took it from
It's one
town
trip
to Mountain
then-
Village core,
Yes.
that's one trip.
Correct.
Got it. So, and there's 3
in the
million of
aggregate,
those.
There's
Uh-huh.
3 million counts of people who've done that. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the rough, the right formula is to figure out how many humans there were on whatever, but they explained to us, for example, that they've brought the car capacity up. I think they added 8 new cars in the past year. So I believe they're at 57 cars on the gondola, which
sure.
is the max as to what can be run safely on that rope.
Right.
So their point to us was, okay, here's a check-in. This is a 22-year moment check-in. We're at capacity. We have certain times of the year, as you might expect, July and Christmas, where we have these amazing peaks, and it creates waiting times.
Right.
And,
Sure,
and
there's lines, yeah.
So their long-term sort of encouragement was, hey guys, we should think about collectively what kind of a replacement gondola may be appropriate. We could keep running this. There was a study by this firm in Switzerland, and this firm determined that A, the gondola is being kept in pristine condition,
Oh, good.
B, notwithstanding the fact that it costs an extreme amount of money to custom mill any parts because no one makes these parts off the shelf anymore. So you're going to have to, if they have some sort of issue with a spare part, it has to be custom made. So that can create delays and expense increases. So that's why their capital expense, on top of that $3.5 million operating expense, ranges anywhere from $50,000 a year to $2 million a year.
Wow, depending on what they have to replace.
Depending on what they have to
Yeah,
replace.
and how dire it is.
So it's kind of just a reality check to start with. It's also a subtle reminder that in 8 years, we probably would be in the best interest for all the entire region to form a consensus about what comes next.
Who pays for the upkeep, who pays for the running of it, all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
and so to that end, the Telluride Mountain Village Owners Association, Anton Benitez, who was there presenting on their behalf, said that the plan of the gondola subcommittee, which includes members of the town council, so Todd Brown and Tom Watkinson, for example, from our council are on that, and then there's 2 members from the Mountain Village Council. County has a representative as well, and then TMVOA has a representative. I think the ski resort actually may have a representative on that. I'm not on that subcommittee, so I can't tell you
Yeah, who's
chapter
sitting
and
at the
verse.
table, yeah.
But the point is, next step is to create a larger working group so that we don't just have 2 representatives of a town council or 1 county commissioner coming back and reporting and maybe, sort of characterizing or summarizing in a non-specific or non-thorough fashion what is discussed.
Yeah.
So I think in 2019, again, looking forward, you'll see the formation of something similar to what we did with SMART. In the SMART case, it was the town of Mountain Village, the town of Telluride, and the county. All those elected officials would get together periodically, let's say every 6 to 8 weeks, and sit down and hammer out what do we want in terms of a regional transit system, how do we figure out how to pay for this, et cetera. What they would like to do is have those same 3 constituents plus the ski resort, and I think there may be 1 or 2 other constituent groups that they're going to invite. So they're going to create an even larger working group because Telski is related to the gondola in that they have an obligation. Actually, they contribute 1%, I believe, of every ski ticket sold, the price of every ski ticket sold to the gondola, because the skiers use the gondola.
Sure.
So that's part of the agreement that the Telski
That's
folks
already running.
already in place, that they have with the Telluride, with the U.S. Forest Service.
Okay.
Sometimes it feels like the Telluride Forest Service, but no. And we do our part to help the Forest Service as well by doing loaning them summer staff and paying for staff to help people stay on trails and find their way around. But so we had a gondola subcommittee work session. Again, no outcomes, just an information check-in point.
And is there going to be meetings coming up that the public should be aware of if they want to chime in on what happens with the gondola, or is that off in the future?
I would say
At the
keep this on
horizon?
your radar. I asked the specific question at the meeting, so how soon is this larger stakeholder group going to assemble? And the answer was, well, we're not entirely sure, but I would say my best guess would be sometime in the first quarter of 2019. So let's say the next 60 to 90 days, people should be on the lookout for, and these will be public meetings just like they were with the Working Group for SMART, where you'll have a much larger group of elected officials as well as other stakeholders in the room. And the whole point there is everyone needs to hear all the information at the same time and be able to then come away and individually digest that and then come back and continue to have a dialogue.
Right, because we have 8 years to figure it out.
We do.
But it'll take 8 years to figure out.
I would say so, yeah. By December 31st, 2027, that's sort of the drop dead date when we as a community need to figure out who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as that. Nobody's made any commitments. Nobody is saying, oh, we're going to have this allocation or we're not going to have any allocations.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of really just making sure that we're all getting on the same page, and finally now, instead of just designated representatives, we're all going to start to get together in the next room, in the same room, sorry, not the next room. There might not be room in the next room.
Yeah.
So we had also a work session with the Ecology Commission. And
okay, talk about
that was
that.
really just to give us an update on, they do an annual work plan, and they come to town council sort of with their priorities. Their number one priority, which should come as no surprise, is a ban on single-use plastics. And so we had explanation from the town attorney, Kevin Geiger, as to the fact that at this point there are a couple of initiatives, not just these communities like ours that are trying to push this on a very individualistic basis, but that the Colorado Municipal League, which is the group that represents all municipalities in the state of Colorado, they have their policy committee, of which I'm a member. We have given direction to our lobbyists at the Colorado Municipal League. I say that as a policy committee member. Your job this legislative session, before the end of the session in April, is to help initiate legislation that would effectively allow for the ban of single-use plastics on a statewide basis.
Wow.
Because we have this sort of vintage late 90s, early 2000s, I think it might be 2004 language, that was adopted as a statewide statute that basically says, and somehow this was a companion to encouraging communities to recycle, and at the same time they said, oh, and by the way, communities aren't allowed to ban single-use plastic or plastics on their own. So we have run against this, or this tension has been highlighted before when we, for example, several years back, banned single-use plastic bags.
Sure.
And we're fortunate enough that that has not been pursued as a legal action, and no one has asserted that that violates state statute.
Right.
A number of other communities have followed suit, most recently Aspen, and theirs was taken up. Now their court case was not focused on whether or not the ban on plastic bags was a violation of state law, but rather whether the fee that was imposed, like we have the fee at Clark's to get a paper bag, which is, they basically modeled theirs after ours. Someone challenged the fee in that case. So the Colorado Supreme Court came out a few months ago and said, no, that fee is entirely appropriate. It's not a tax. It's not a disguised tax, because that would have to go to the voters under Tabor.
This is you purchasing a bag to put your groceries in.
This is me purchasing a bag to put my groceries in if I've forgotten to bring my own bag.
Right.
So we're still a little bit in a state of limbo, but I think what you're going to see is with the newly elected majorities in both the State House and the State Senate, as well as the new governor, you'll have much more focus on moving ahead quickly to try to do be more environmentally proactive and sensitive, and that includes potentially straightening out this ambiguity or clarifying this ambiguity surrounding
whether or not you
single-use
can
plastics.
Uh-huh.
So as much as the good folks on our Ecology Commission would love to have Telluride next meeting, which will be February 5th, 2019, getting used to saying that,
Yeah.
as much as they would like us to take up a first reading of an ordinance banning single-use plastics, we would like to closely follow and dovetail in behind what the Colorado Municipal League is doing.
Mm-hmm.
The town attorney, Telluride town attorney, also advised us that there's at least one bill that will be introduced probably in the next week or so that will do that will try to help clarify and strike the so-called
The ban,
offending language
right.
at the state.
So that then you can go forward and make your
So
own
then
plans.
I think we can all be on the same page. Now,
Okay.
some champions on the Ecology Commission, like Jonathan Greenspan, for example, would love for us to get out in front and to actually put our stamp and imprimatur on the idea that we're the first in Colorado to do this. Councilperson Young actually very adeptly pointed out that a lot of the media reports that have come out since Aspen did the same thing we did years ago. We're crediting Aspen, for example, with being the first community to ban plastic bags. So
That's just some bad reporting.
it's just
there.
bad reporting. In your
Yeah.
journalistic background, you would
Yes,
know, and we would all
I
hope
can identify that.
some
yeah.
people would just get the facts right, but
Yeah.
you know, nowadays, for whatever reason, we don't always
It
get.
makes a
We did
good
not
headline.
get. We didn't even get the credit that we were the first in Colorado to ban those banned plastic bags. So that's a process that I think you'll see unfolding in probably the next 120 days.
Oh, neat.
And so hopefully by April or May we'll be back reporting that there will be no conflict between state law and our ability to go ahead and ban single-use plastics. And my sense is that there's a strong majority on council that will want to do that.
Oh, great.
And that already would like to do that. So the Ecology Commission was basically delivering their annual work plan, explaining that their top goal was that, and getting our approval, which we then subsequently said, yes, you have our approval, please move forward on that. Please move forward with your education campaign. I have to, hats off to the Ecology Commission for a moment, because they have independently, regardless of whether there's been any ordinance that's been on the table, they've gone around to all the restaurants and a lot of the other retailers and said, okay, how about this? How about a voluntary program where you just don't offer any single-use plastic type
Right.
of items? So apparently 75% of the restaurants have already taken certain steps to eliminate those sort of things.
So the consumer has to opt in rather than opt out.
Right. And so we have at least a situation now where we already have voluntary compliance, so to speak, by a vast majority of users otherwise or purveyors of single-use plastics. So we're on our way,
Yeah.
and we've made good progress already, and that's really thanks to the Ecology Commission. And so they're going to continue their education program, they're going to continue their outreach program, and then that's probably going to very likely get followed up with a formal ordinance, hopefully in tandem and immediately after the state clarifies that. I don't think you'll see a lot of opposition on the state level. So that was another useful work session. We also had a tour of the recently decked over 74-space underground garage at the Lot B at the SMPA location.
Yes,
Sorry.
sure. There used to be a big hole in the ground, and now it's
At
covered
Fern
up.
Pacific.
And
so
underneath is the parking
is a
spots.
finished parking garage.
Wow.
All it lacks is the painted striping. So we were walked through with hard hats. We were shown the traffic pattern. The ceiling height, the lowest ceiling height in that garage is 8 foot 2 inches.
Wow.
I mean, some of us have been in parking garages where you feel like, I'm not a very tall person, but I
Yeah.
feel like there's probably like 4 inches of clearance
Right.
above my head. So we have very generous, and that's the minimum. So that's
Wow.
the smallest
And
ceiling height.
where will the cars access that parking garage from? From Pacific Street,
They will come in
east
off
of-
of Pacific, yeah.
east of what is that?
So
Fur?
basically, yes, east of Fur. Yep,
Yeah.
on the north side of the street.
Yeah,
Yep.
sure.
So that was quite impressive to see that come together and to see that. We started moving dirt in April. I think it was April 9th, 2018. And then, as you will recall, December 15th, 2018, we opened those roadways back up, much to the relief, delight, whatever,
Yes.
of the local
Of the businesses that
population
had
and
been-
the
yeah.
businesses and thank you to them for their patience and for their understanding. And now let's hope the fact that 74 vehicles may be clustered in very, very tight proximity to their businesses,
Yeah,
that
maybe
once
that'll give
that's
them a little
open
boost.
at the end of 2019, that will give them a boost.
Yeah.
And so the good news is the rest of that project, as you walk by, and I know you asked me this community question last time about when will this structure be done and how soon will we see it. You obviously see elevator columns and staircase columns coming up out of the ground as of a week ago. That project, according to the contractor, to Shaw Construction, is to be done, we think, in the late fall of 2019.
Wow.
So we will all be able to put this behind us as a memory of a hopefully temporary inconvenience that didn't really have any lasting negative effect, and in fact creates a future positive effect.
Yeah.
So that's another good thing to look forward to in 2019.
Yeah.
We also talked about another topic that's garnered some interest, and we went ahead with the reading of a first ordinance, and we'll follow that up with a second ordinance reading at the February 5th meeting, and that was, do you recall our conversation about the special event permits for liquor license holders? So
Oh, yes,
these are the
exactly.
festival liquor licenses.
Sure.
So what we did is, based on the feedback that we received both from the 3 principal promoters of the 4 principal festivals, as well as the discussion that unfolded at the December 4th meeting of council, we then on January 15th coalesced around an idea that as a default, and there is a process for an exception, but the default rule under the first reading, and of course this could change if second reading doesn't support this, but I doubt it would, 100% of the net proceeds from sales of alcohol under a special event liquor license permit at a festival on publicly owned property in the town of Telluride,
For example, at Town Park.
must benefit a
A
local
local
or
nonprofit.
regional nonprofit that has that's focus is San Miguel County.
Ah.
So there is a process where town council itself may grant exceptions to that, and there may be special circumstances where that's warranted. But at least the default rule that we're contemplating, and I think will probably end up being adopted and then therefore codified as of February 5th, is 100% of the proceeds, stay local, and then the distribution time. There's been some question about how soon do festivals need to distribute these things out to nonprofits, and the idea is 120 days is the default rule now for distribution of those funds, so that organizations that are counting on these things and budgeting and maybe doing programming around that can have some more security around the fact that within 120 days they should have those funds. The other thing that we sort of grappled with was allowing the liquor license hearing officer. We gave him or her the authority to engage a third-party accountant or other professional advisor
to see what's going on with
clarify
the
if there's questions as to reasonability of expenses or allocation of expenses. That is now something where the hearing officer has the authority to basically pick up the phone and engage someone in some CPA somewhere to come in and make that judgment call.
Yeah.
So
Now, I run a local nonprofit.
okay.
So how
Called
called the Pinhead Institute, providing STEM education, pre-K through 12th grade, here in Telluride, but also all around the Four Corners here. So my question is, how does that mechanism start? I mean, do the people who already run and promote these larger events in Town Park then just decide who their favorite nonprofits are? That the
discretion is still there. They are allowed to pick any
excuse me, I need to make a couple phone calls now.
any local exactly. You might want to put 3 certain individuals I can think of on speed dial. It is up to them, but they are limited to a much tighter universe of eligible recipients, and so.
They used to have their own
Pinhead being
funds.
one of them, and so what we've done exactly, and you point out another thing. One other aspect that I failed to mention was we also have built in the concept that the ultimate beneficiary from these net proceeds needs to be an exempt organization that's exempt from federal income tax. There are 37 different kinds of those that are recognized, Pinhead being one of those types. So it is not limited to a 501c3.
It could be a 501c4 or something like that.
6, 8. There are a number. The universe is quite broad. It's just that the geographical possibility is much narrower. So it should set up organizations like Pinhead and other regional entities.
And we have amazing regional entities here.
And I think, 190 some odd nonprofits in town. So
yes.
The idea, and I know you know from real life experience as to how every dollar, it's like a zero-sum game, and everyone's competing for the same resources. So hopefully this will allow maybe a little bit more of a boost to the local,
nonprofit
organizations.
incomes.
Exactly.
Sure. Oh, that's
So
nice.
that's our
Yeah.
hope, at least, and that's our
And the
intent.
next meeting that will deal with this is February 5th.
February 5th.
Mark
So-
my calendar.
So it'll be sometime after 1 p.m.
Uh-huh.
It'll be an action item, so it'll come after the public comment period is over, so it'll be after 1 p.m. So keep your eyes out, and please show up, and any other organization that wants to weigh in on this, good or bad, we welcome all input.
So I'm ready for a question from the community, because it might have already been addressed at this town
Okay.
council meeting, and that is, what is about the water fees?
Okay, so the water fees
that-
went up 30%. The
It was a surprise
sewer
to
fees
some.
went up 70%, so the blended averages, it went up 50%.
Right.
So the takeaway is, frankly, we have a history since, I think it was 2009. We had not made any adjustments upward in terms of the wastewater fees, for sure. The water fees have gradually increased, but really haven't kept pace with the real cost of doing business. And so, and we've talked about this before, there are sort of three different basic approaches. You can either charge the public for exactly what the cost is, so that's the fee model, the direct fee model. You can borrow money so that you can effectively pay over time for the real cost of running either water or sewer, or you can do a hybrid, a combination of both. But do nothing was no longer an option for us, because we were finding that we were taking so much money out of the general fund.
Right, to pay
and
for the water
to pay
bills
for-
and the
to
waste.
basically, yes, fill the gap
Yeah.
in both the water and the wastewater
And
treatment
so
context.
these increases had been addressed at previous public meetings. It's just that
There
people
have been a
weren't
series-
necessarily aware of that.
Right.
Uh-huh.
This is always kind of one of the hazards of, government, because not everybody has the time to follow every one of these meetings. Not everybody scrutinizes the agendas.
And that
That's
might not
completely
get a
understandable.
headline in the paper the next day.
Exactly, but
Uh-huh,
then
but it
all
sure
of a
did
sudden,
get a lot of attention.
when your February bill arrives and you get a more than a small incremental increase, then that gets your attention.
Yeah.
So, and the reason being is only simply that all we're doing is trying to cover the actual costs.
Cover the actual
It
cost.
is
Now, I do
not-
know, you and I have spoken many times before, there will be a need for a huge capital investment in a new or upgraded sewer treatment
The
system.
wastewater treatment plant.
This is not putting aside money for that.
Partly. The 70% increase in the wastewater treatment, the wastewater fees, really do partly go to funding the near term and the actual current needs and plugging some of that shortfall.
Yeah.
So it is going toward plugging some of the operational deficit with respect to that, and also starting to hopefully start to build some reserves. So
Right.
the answer is actually it is.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah, because that's going to be something that'll loom over us eventually, that we'll have to make a big
And we've
change.
talked about this before. We sort of have a 2 to 5 year plan right now that's on the order of $8 million, and we need to,
And this
through
is
a
helping to meet
combination.
that?
Exactly. This is filling part of that $8 million of obligation that the town will have to do an intermediate improvement to that plant to keep up with the evolving and current standards that the state imposes. And then the longer term, the remainder of that that's not derived from fees will be a $5-6 million bond that we'll ask the voters to approve. They can say no. This will be
Yeah.
November of 19. So that's the intermediate solution. And then the longer term feature is, okay, how do we raise the remaining, let's say, $75 million to get us to where we need to be to have a wastewater treatment plant that can address the needs of not just the existing peak demands, but also the growth of the community over the next 30 years. Because this should be a forward-looking process. That's our job, is to look forward. It's not to look backwards. And unfortunately, I realize people are mad that we've not, increased fees in prior years to really keep up with this,
So it wasn't such a
looming need.
surprise, yeah.
But
Or
there
such a
were a
big
series of
increase.
work sessions at council, and these are kind of not the sexiest, most interesting things, and I totally understand if people really didn't focus, or if those who were there kind of tuned out. But to your point, yes, the reality is, starting with your February bills, you'll see a
increase.
market increase. Yes.
Yeah,
A blended average of 50% between your water and wastewater.
okay.
So that's still below, I would point out, though, what the Mountain Village has been charging. So we've
Okay.
actually been subsidizing the costs.
Are
in
these
the
real
town.
costs, by the way? Is it taking into account every time I turn on my Holbrooke tap and the Holbrooke home, or is it this kind of generalized usage over the entire town and then however many people are inside your home?
Your consumption, there's sort of a base amount of consumption, and then if you exceed that, there's an incremental cost as well that the Holbrookes might pay, for example, if they were
Oh, we're
using-
very, yeah, we're
if they
very
were not
frugal.
as sparing with their
No,
water.
we're very
But
thrifty.
so it's both. Yeah.
It's both, okay, yeah. Anything else that was at the council meeting?
Let's see, what else did we talk about? Well, there was sort of there was some discomfort, as you might, not every council meeting is harmonious. We did approve the case recommendation for funding in 2019.
Okay.
So the important news here is, unlike many communities, we are in a pretty fortunate situation in that we're able to dedicate about $500,000 a year toward community events and special events and arts events. So we had, in the past, we had these quote-unquote 7-line item recipients
Yes.
of monies from the town, including Telluride Television.
Yes, right,
for
exactly. That
example.
came from the cable franchise fees or something like that. The town collects
We
fees
do
and
pass
then
those on
pass
to
it
Telluride
through.
TV,
Right,
but that wasn't
exactly.
enough. And so Telluride TV in years past, for example, not to pick on them, but just to use them as an example of one of these 7, behavioral health is another one, and you can fill in the other blanks as you choose. But these organizations used to come to us directly and say, hey, this is our annual need. Here's what the annual, let's say franchise fee that's dedicated for us is. Here's the gap. Please fill the gap.
Right.
And so we would generally say yes.
It would be written into the budget, and
So
now it's part of
as
the
of
case.
2019, we said, hey, could
consideration
we,
instead.
because it's hard to draw a real distinction between these 7 organizations
And the
the
many
other
others,
40
including Pinhead, that are asking for money.
that ask for money
Uh-huh.
from CASE. Maybe CASE should be the one that's considering this entire grand.
Right, because they have a board and they have a structure and grant requests. I mean, we fill that out, I know.
They have very strict
yeah.
policies and procedures. They actually have, so the idea there was, again, they are already expert in doing this.
Yeah.
They're expert at looking at these organizations' financial statements. They're expert in asking the right questions. They're expert in actually doing the follow-up audits to make sure that the funds received, how they were actually used. The town council was giving kind of these annual one-off grants, but we really weren't following through.
It was a little bit based on what your gut feeling was about the thing, rather than reviewing all the paperwork that the case
And
board
there was
does
no
review.
obligation for them to come back to us and report, whereas at the case level, in some ways, it's leveling the playing field, because we had 40 organizations, let's say, that were abiding by these rules and had very strict guidelines as to, here's eligibility requirements,
And
here's what the use
accountability,
has to be,
yeah.
here's your accountability,
Sure.
and then next year when you come, back,
Yeah.
we are going to,
Yeah.
verify, and it's trust but verify. In our case, it was just trust.
Right.
So for 7 organizations, we said we trust you to use the money however you've said you're going to use it. Case says, okay, we recognize the need, here's the allocation. So as you might imagine, there were quote unquote winners and losers. There were certain organizations that said, oh, well, we simply asked for a certain amount because we had received that in the past from the town, and we just thought Case would go ahead and say, yeah, rubber stamp that.
Oh, okay.
Well, when
And-
these strict criteria
Yeah.
and this analysis was applied and this different lens was used
Then
to scrutinize the
outcome
grant,
was slightly
the
different
outcome
than
might have
perhaps
been
some people-
87%
Yeah.
of the 100% asked for. And so we did have some organizations, and it's no fault of their own, who said, oh, well, A, we were not clear on the rules, B, we were, we feel at a disadvantage because we should have asked for more to effectively game the system by asking for 50 if I need 40 type of
Right.
thing. And so this is a learning process for everybody involved. I wouldn't say for Case, because they are very skilled at doing this. This was a learning process for us to see the feedback or the fallout, in some cases, depends on what F word you would like to use. We won't go any further than that, as to the outcomes
Right.
for the 47 different recipients for that.
Sure.
So that was another conversation that unfolded that was sometimes less than happy for certain recipients, but frankly, and I hope it's true. Hats off to Craig Ferguson and to the Bluegrass Festival. Coda made us aware of the fact that they were $5,600 short of what they had asked for from Case, and by the end of the meeting, when Mr. Ferguson's group came up for comment, public comment, and promoter input in the special event permit liquor license conversation, Craig made the statement that he said, well, I've been on the sidelines talking to Codo about giving him $6,000 to fill their hole. So it's also a process of highlighting where these gaps are.
And
one
how
of the
can they
best
be
ways to
filled?
highlight it is to have this kind of a process where, oh my gosh, feel my pain, here's my organization, here's my shortfall. Let's hope other people watching or listening or reflecting now on this thing might think about which organizations came up short, and maybe I could help them out.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
there's such a nice symbiosis between the music festivals and Codo.
right.
Yeah.
But we also have to keep in mind, I mean, I went to the Kennedy School almost, coming up on 3 years ago for a state and local government program for 3 weeks. And when we were all it was mostly town managers and other administrators, and there were a couple of mayors there and some state legislators, but of a class of 60 people, when the elected officials were talking about, well, here's what we do for community support. We are uncommonly generous. Most municipalities do not have an extra, let's say, 500,000 or X% of their annual budget that they can simply go ahead and give to community organizations.
Really?
No.
Oh my
Most of them
goodness.
are sort of, strapped under the weight of, holy cow,
How do we keep the lights on?
my police union and my teachers union and my other municipal workers unions are fighting and pushing back on me. It's not about, oh, thank goodness we have this extra amount of money that we can actually share back to the community. And so we, Telluride, are in a very fortunate position. And so I don't think we should lose sight of that, because they all kind of looked dumbstruck when I said, oh, well, we actually give away 3% of our annual budget to these kind of organizations. And we have
other
a separate
places
board
don't.
that generally vets the applicants for these funds and distributes the money according to need, according to compliance and whatnot with the stated objective.
Nice.
And I think these things are also, I'm not a case board member, so I would encourage you to reach out to Sasha Sullivan and the other case board members to get detail, but things like, we're not in the business of funding necessarily capital sort of expenditures for these organizations. We want the operating programs.
Right.
We want to help bring a particular event to town. We want to help some operating cost that an organization is incurring to do good work.
Yeah.
And so this is something that government is not good at doing itself. It shouldn't be running these kind of programs, and B, it's great when government can actually pitch in and help these sort of organizations.
Right, they give so much back to the constituents that the government takes care of.
Because that enhances quality of life for all of us. So it is really checking the box on government's biggest thing is make sure quality of life is is as high as it can be. But there are always, again, not to put too fine a point on it, but there are going to be winners and losers, and there are going to be people who wish they had received more, and so we can take a step back and learn from what we've just seen and see what
and get the messaging out there better, maybe, for one thing. Yeah.
for worthy organizations that there is a very defined and specific process that has to be followed, and it will be it's not an easy task to sort of go through that, but that is the fairest way to distribute this block of money.
Yeah, sure.
And so that was a little tougher. Also, the Ride Festival, the additional day concert on the 12th of July was approved by Town Council. That process had started with the Ride Festival with Todd Creel coming to us with an application for an extra night of a performance. We still don't know the identity of the performer unless it's been released in the last few days. It's unknown to me, but at least now I can tell you what the projected economic benefit was. But the nice thing is the process unfolded just the way it should have. It was first brought to council, and it was sort of are you guys interested in us proceeding, or is there a majority of council that's going to say no way when this goes through the Parks and Rec Board and goes back to case for the date and then comes to you? So it's kind of an initial peek at what's your final thought about this? And 5 members of the 6 that were able to deliberate about this, because one member had a conflict and she was not able to to participate in the work session, and also then not in this vote at our January 15th meeting, and that was because The Parks and Rec Board voted unanimously 5-0, and because Case voted unanimously, I think it was 6-0 or whatever, to allow for this additional night of setup,
then town
I
council.
flipped because I had been the only member of town council that said, I'm a little wary of this, I'm a little worried, I've gotten nothing but negative feedback from community members about it's loud, I don't want another loud night. It could be the permission, they're able to have up to 9,000 tickets sold for that additional concert. So
Big
now,
influx of people and
keeping
noise.
that in perspective, the ride in the last few years and the data that was provided in the packet indicates that the ride on average is selling about 5,000 to 5,500 tickets per night.
Okay.
So
And what is the stated economic benefit?
the stated economic benefit was really an extra, let's call it, $700,000 directly
Wow.
to the community.
Yeah.
And so the
So you
Telluride
flipped.
Tourism Board, I flipped with the reservation of, okay, if both of the lower boards, and I'm a big believer in you listen to your lower boards as well, and if both of those lower boards considered the same facts and circumstances that I did, and I went as a private citizen to the Parks and Rec Board, and I raised my hand and I said, I just have to say, I have heard from constituents, and I myself, think that another concert and another evening of noise is a burden, and I don't really understand the benefit yet. Well, at this meeting on the 15th of January, the Telluride Tourism Board was able to include in the packet an estimate of the economic benefit using a bunch of variables and not getting into all the weeds on that, but they basically estimated, let's call it $750,000 of direct benefit.
So that flipped the switch
Times
for you.
2 to 2.75, that's an extra $1.5 million, $2 million of benefit to the community. So to me, it's okay. Is 3 hours worth another $2 million of benefit? And the answer is yes. My concern that I did raise was parking, and again, there has been a historic arrangement where the Ride Festival was able to use some parking facility up in Mountain Village, their garage. They would buy out the garage, so to speak, and let their guests park in there. If we had 9,000 people come to town, not just the 5,500 historic number, holy cow, there's no way an extra 4,000 people or 2,000 cars, let's say people are nice enough to carpool and it's 2 to a car. If we have that many additional cars, what are we going to do with them? That is not necessarily going to be the case. It's a hypothetical, but
You have to consider it.
it's part of my job to think about, okay, what if? And that's a what if. Let's hope it doesn't happen. I doubt it will happen. Certainly the promoter also expressed the view that it was very unlikely to happen. So let's see what happens.
Yeah.
But for now, we, the town council, then locked arms unanimously and approved this additional concert Friday night, the 12th of July. So there will be hopefully some talent announced at some point that will bring many, but maybe not 9,000 people or 9,000 tickets being sold. Not that we don't want the promoter to do well, but that's the balancing act. So, but at least we could balance. In my case, I was able to get over the fact that initially I said, look, I don't know who the talent is, and I don't know what the economic benefit is. So how can I balance the complaints about noise with that?
Right.
Well, when you have some economic indication and estimate, then let's just hope the talent matches up, and we'll all have a good result, and they'll all do well.
Yeah, exactly.
And it'll be an extra night of noise. And really, the Parks and Rec Department, it was very telling because our leader there, Stephanie Jacquet, who does just a fantastic job. She's on top of the detail on everything. Her point, which was very well made, both at the December 4th indication of interest discussion as well as at the January 15th up or down by town council conversation was, look, we've already, quote unquote, displaced the users, which is the adult softball and the youth baseball, for that entire period anyway.
Right.
Having this concert on Friday night is not going to have any incremental displacement on top of that already agreed or sanctioned displacement. So that is obviously something to take into account, which was taken into account. So that really covers the universe of what was talked about on the 15th.
Shall we do
so
another-
the other thing we should talk about, though, just looking forward, is on February 5th, we will be having a work session. This will be morning, sometime between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. We will be having the beginning of a public conversation about the Youth Link lot, the Voodoo Lounge lot.
Oh, right,
And this could be
exactly.
one of the one of the questions from the community. I might be stealing your thunder on something, but the idea there is there have been a couple developer groups who have expressed interest to town staff and who have approached town staff and said, hey, we'd like to talk about meeting multiple needs. We'd like to talk about providing some affordable housing on site. This would be at their expense too, not the town's. The town's only contribution to this would be a long-term lease on the land.
Right,
So
like a
not-
100-year lease or something.
Or,
Yeah.
for example, with TSRC, the agreement that was reached with them, the agreement to lease if certain milestones were met, which did not in the end up happening. The former two town councils ago said, okay, TSRC, we will grant you a 99-year lease on this parcel if you bring the following public benefits to the
Right.
table, like an auditorium for a community gathering space and such and such.
Right.
So we're going to open up a conversation about, here's a couple concrete proposals. Here are the public benefits that are associated with them. What other user groups in town have interest in this land? Telluride Arts obviously has an interest right now because they're using the Voodoo Lounge, the structure.
Right, it's where the Stronghouse people used to be.
Right.
They're now in
They
that building.
transitioned
Yep.
over. Our former town manager, Greg Clifton, granted them a short-term right that was not meant to be in perpetuity to use that facility for art, to make art.
Yeah.
And so that's been going on nicely. Then we've got the user group of the youth who are
Using the
using
skate
it for
park.
the skate park. We have other youth in the community who are keen to talk about having a youth center of some sort, either there or in another location. So this is an opportunity for people to start weighing in and saying, okay, and this is again something where if our next project is Sunnyside in 2019, 2020, this is a 2021 conversation. So again, this is a work session, no outcome, no pre-planned sort of resolution or direction.
Right.
It's just the matter of, just like with the AHA School, we've been approached. It's time to open up the, open
So
up
when
the
you say open the
kimono.
conversation, if people
Exactly, and say, here's what we're hearing,
come in
here's our
and
asset,
comment.
what do you want us to do with the asset?
So if people have an opinion about that site and what should be done,
They
they
should-
should come to the
they should
February
come to
5th
the
work
February
session
5th work
sometime
session.
between 10 and noon.
10 and noon.
Okay,
right.
great. So we'll read the agenda and see when it's on the
Yes,
calendar. Oh, that's great.
So-
yeah, just one more question
Yes.
from the community, and that is, what's your New Year's resolution? It's still January.
Well, I haven't lost any weight yet. I told you what I was supposed to be doing is getting more active. So I can claim to have skied a few times since last we talked. I have not used the treadmill yet, which was another one of my things. So my New Year's resolution was to be just a lot more active, physically active.
Right, exactly.
And yours, I can't recall.
I don't actually make
You don't.
resolutions.
Okay, so
No.
you get off the hook. You let yourself
It's not
off
that
the
I'm
hook.
perfect or anything. It's just that
Okay.
I'm constantly a work in progress. So I feel like
All right.
why tie it to one time of the calendar year?
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, no, and this is, in my case, this is going to be a multi-month process
Yes,
too.
uh-huh. I will tell you, I'm going to be in the Tab fashion show, in the Telluride AIDS
Holy
benefit
cow.
fashion show, and
So
I've
are
done
you
it once
furiously
before.
rehearsing and working
well,
out
we
and-
have our first one coming up this week.
Okay.
And it's
I'm
boot camp.
impressed.
I'm very excited. So anyhow, you always get very fit and active during that time because, of course, you want to make sure that you show
So
off your
how does
best
one
self.
become a participant
tab
in
model?
a tab model?
Well,
Yes.
it's not just natural good looks, Sean. It's a lot of work. No, they had auditions. Anybody
You have to
could
be
try
smart
out.
as a whip too,
Yeah.
right? Huh? Yeah.
I don't know about that, but I
Or
just
have the most fashionable footwear
I know, my
imaginable.
footwear is pretty great.
I think this could qualify for runway.
I know, and I
Yeah.
wasn't even wearing these that day. But no, my daughter invited me. She had done
Ah.
it in 2014. I did it in 2015, and she said, "Mom, let's try out together." So we went
Did she
together.
do the student fashion show?
No,
or
no,
did
she did the
real-
grown-up
real
fashion
thing?
show.
Oh,
She was
ooh.
an 18-year-old doing the grown-up fashion show. It was after high school. They don't take high schoolers, so it was just after high school.
Yep.
And she did that and had a great time. And then I did it the next year because I figured, why should she have all the fun?
Exactly.
So anyhow, now we're going to do it together. Hopefully, we'll get to walk together. That'll be fabulous.
Oh, those
Yeah.
are always like some of the best. I tell you, the first year I lived in Telluride, I had a friend visiting me from Miami Beach who was a bit of a kind of a picky East Coaster, and we
As
sat
they
through
can
that
be.
fashion show, and he turned to me and he was like, "This is as good as anything I've ever seen in New York,
Yep.
or
Yeah.
anywhere."
My in-laws were here when BB was in the show, and we kept warning them it could be kind of racy. And then afterwards, they're like, "We go to Broadway all the time. This is not racy," but it was very good.
Yeah.
It always is
No,
very good.
this is another
Yeah.
thing where we punch so far above our weight.
Yes.
So much for not
Yeah.
to use that as a negative.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
we end
Oh, it's-
up
it's a
like
great show.
shining, and it attracts people from all over the place,
Yes.
and garners the respect that it deserves.
Yeah, and raises a lot of money to fight AIDS. So how about that?
That's an excellent cause. And
Yeah.
I know, just a shout out too, I happen to know this because I had a birthday party in December, and I was lucky enough to have one of the members of Intel Corporation who's donated $180,000 to TAB
Wow.
for a program to put computers in schools, girls' schools in Africa.
Oh, wow.
So that is just one of the many things that TAB does, and that is that's kind of one of those partners who's just stepped up this year. They've watched, they've evaluated. I think they were this close to doing it last year, and now they've got to the point where they're like, yeah, we're ready to go. And so Intel is going to be making a substantial
fabulous.
contribution to helping and educating, and
Yeah,
then also
because
thereby
educating
fighting.
girls
Yes,
fights AIDS
exactly.
big time in
So-
the developing world. Yeah. Yeah, fabulous. Well, that's it for me. Anything else I have
No,
not
I think
asked
we've
you about
covered
that
the
you wanna
universe. Just
answer?
please think about the February 5th work session we've talked about,
Yes.
about the Voodoo Lounge / Youth Link lot, what uses, what sort of concerns, any other thoughts you want to share about that. If you would like to come in and weigh in on the second reading of an ordinance for the use of net liquor license proceeds staying 100% local to qualified exempt organizations, if you have any opinion on that, please come out to our meeting. That'll be the afternoon of February 5th. So far, I think those are the highlights. And then again, like we've said, we have more employee housing to look forward to toward the end of 2019. We have a collaboration project, which is a wonderful, it's been since 2006 since we've done a county-town joint project. That
What
was
was that
Gold
one?
Run.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So we now have on the horizon a 2019 collaboration between the county and the town, which is fantastic. And hopefully this is just the beginning of a lot more collaborative work. And then keep your eyes open for whatever this gondola.
Subcommittee.
It's not going to be a
work,
subcommittee
yeah.
anymore.
A
It'll be
committee.
a gondola convening group of all elected officials plus other stakeholders like Telski that will be open to the public, where you are invited to come and make
figure
your
out
views known.
what we're going to do
And
8 years from now.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Well, it's never too early to talk about because the cost is real.
Yeah, for
And it's
sure.
one of those things that we need to figure out how much do we value this. And I like to. This is a Nancy Pelosi ripoff line, actually. So now that she's back in power, I guess we can say this. She has a very, I think, pretty prescient saying of, "Show me your budget, and I'll show you your values."
Oh,
And
interesting.
so
Yeah.
this is an idea
Yeah,
of
public free
we're kind of-
transportation. That's a great.
We're
yeah.
defining our values through this process. How much do we value the gondola, to whom, whatever, and then we have to correspond that at some point with a budget of some sort.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and get out and
there we
ski.
go.
How about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
More snow, ski as much as you can.
Yeah.
Enjoy all of this great weather while it lasts.
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
well,
Sarah,
thank you, Sean. Always a pleasure.
Likewise.
Take care.
Thanks, you too. Thank you.